Okay, please, good evening, everyone. I hope we are all doing well. Please let me know if you hear my voice very well. Okay, yes. Please, am I heard? Can you hear my voice? Is it down or is up? Let me know so I can do the adjustments. Okay, all right. Is the volume okay, or I should increase my tone small? Okay, so it seems I'm heard. All right. So quick one. Let's let's just um go through the human behavior very quick. So um before you know how we do our tutorials, we normally do them in a form of questions. But um I think I would want us to just go through the slides, some areas that I think it demands more elaboration. So I'll just elaborate more on those areas. Then when we are done, some small questions, then we just go through the questions as well. Then I think when we are done, we will be good for now. Yes. So I think when the session is done, I'll share some, I think, videos with Ernest or even Hannah. Then I think they will put it on our page. Then when you are able to access all those videos before God willing tomorrow, I'm very positive that we will be fine and we can write and write as well. So as Doug said, so I think today we had that discussion, and she said um, with the human behavior, I think it will be theory. And I think the last time she came to class, she justified why you are going to write theory, because previously it wasn't like that. But now, due to them, they went for some review meeting, and they said that all final year students, the examination should be theory, yes. Also, anything written, not scannables, that's MCQs or multiple choice questions. So that is why your exam is in that format. But I'm very positive that um, God willing, tomorrow it will be more of short answers. Yes, it will be more of short answers, because as she says, there will be no case study or so. Yeah, so I think the question will be more of short answers. Maybe a question, maybe 5 marks, 4 marks, 3 marks, like that is it, or maybe 10 marks. So it will be in that format. So 3 marks or 5 marks, maybe explain this. Then the marks allocated will be, let's say, five, let's say four, let's say three. So that is how it's going to be. And as I said, when you are able to go through the slides very well, there's no need for you to fear anything, because I think if you're able to go through them vividly and coherently, trust me, anything that comes, regardless of the form of the question, you would be able to solve them. So I think there are some key. Someone says we can't hear. Please, can you hear me? Please, we can't hear. Please, can you hear me now? Let me know if the voice is okay. I don't know why you can't hear me. My voice is too down. It is still too down. Let me know if it's still too down. Okay. It is still too down. Please, it is too down, or it's okay now. I don't know why. But I hope you can hear me now, right? It goes off and like on and off. Then I think that will be. Yeah, my voice is low. Hey, they are saying my voice is low. I don't know why, but the setting to everything is. Maybe I'm sure it's the network. Maybe it's something like that because I think right now I'm really screaming. I'm really screaming, but I don't know why my voice is too down. Yes, because the way I'm talking there, I'm very sure everybody should be able to hear me. I don't know why you are saying my voice is too down. So please, maybe I don't know, but I'm really shouting here. So I don't know. I don't know why it's still down. Okay, so let me still proceed. So as I was saying, um, that is the approach the examination will take. Yes. So I'm very positive that it will be more of short answers. Yes. So maybe a question will come and the question they will allocate, let's say 5 marks, let's say 10 marks, let's say 3 marks, 4 marks. That is how it will be. So you kind of know what you must expect. Okay. So basically, I think some areas that we cannot ignore whenever we are preparing for human behavior has to do with the dimensions. And I know everybody here knows the dimensions of human behavior. We have three main dimensions. We know we have the biological dimension. But then you see, the biological dimension, sometimes they normally refer it as biophysical. So maybe God willing tomorrow, when a question comes, that maybe explain the biophysical dimension. So the biophysical is the same as the biological. Okay. So maybe in case you did not see the biological and see biophysical, it's the same thing. Because I think dog really like using biophysical. Yeah, she really like biophysical instead of biological. So whenever you hear or you see biophysical, it's the same as the biological dimension. Don't forget this one. Okay. Yes, we know that dimension. That's the biological dimension. We know that it is the first dimension of human behavior. Okay. The biological dimension is the first dimension of human behavior, and it is made up of the physical development factors and also the physiological factors. Okay. Now, when we are talking about the biological dimension, we know what it comprises of. So we are talking about the heredity, okay, the genetics, and also DNA. So these three things come together to form the biological dimension. So in human behavior, whenever we are doing any assessment and using the biological dimension, what are we trying to focus on, or what is the focus on? So the focus is on when we are looking at the family history of the client. So one's family history falls under the biological dimension. Okay. When we're also looking at one's medical history, so your medical history, that is your past medical history, and also your present medical history, they all fall under the biological dimension. If you are looking at, let's say, one's genetics, okay, the color of maybe someone's eye, one's emotions, one behavior, are you okay? All these falls under the biological dimension. So don't forget, okay? Now, as I said, we have the genetics, the DNA, and also the heredity. So all these form parts of the biological dimension. Okay. Now, the DNA is more important factor determining our genetical makeup. Okay. So when we want to know one's genetical makeup, it is the function or the role of the DNA. Okay. Now, the biological dimension also has the capacity or the tendency to influence how individuals interact in the environment. So if I say the biological dimension has the capacity or it has the ability to influence how the individual interacts in our everyday life or in our everyday living, what am I trying to say? You see, I said that the biological dimension is made up of the genetics and also the heredity. And you can all attest to me that, let's say, if someone is having a genetic disorder, like someone is suffering from, let's say, cerebral palsy, or the person is having, let's say, um, some illness, are you okay? Something that is more genetics in nature. So you see someone having this cerebral palsy, or the person is having suffering from, I've forgotten this particular disorder, um, autism. Yes, autism. So when somebody is having autism, or when somebody is having, let's say, cerebral palsy, it is the role of the genetics. And you see, this autism or this cerebral palsy can influence how the person interacts in their day-to-day life. You can all attest to me that when someone is facing or suffering from autism or cerebral palsy, now that person cannot go and interact with people. They are always indoor. That is why we are saying that the biological dimension has the capacity to influence how individual interacts in their day-to-day life. Please, are you getting what I'm trying to say? Please, are you getting me? Please, are you getting the example I'm trying to make here? So when we say the biological dimension, that is one key thing that you shouldn't forget. That the biological dimension has the capacity to influence how the individual interacts in our everyday life. Because with someone suffering from a genetic disorder, and genetic disorder is coming from the biological dimension. Are you okay? And this can create isolation because someone suffering from, let's say, cerebral palsy or autism, they are always indoor. And this is affecting how they interact in their everyday life. You cannot go to work, you cannot go to even school like, because of that condition, you have to always be indoor, and somebody should always be attentive, taking care of you. And that is the role of the biological dimension. So it has the capacity to influence how the individual interacts or how the individual behave in their everyday life. That is the role of the biological dimension. And it is the first dimension of human behavior. It is made up of what? The heredity, the genetics, and also the DNA. Don't forget this one. Now, the second dimension is the psychological dimension. And please, as I said earlier on, when you hear biophysical dimension, biophysical dimension is the same as the biological dimension. So, God willing, if you don't see anything on biological dimension and you see biophysical dimension, they are all the same thing. Don't forget. Biological is the same as biophysical. So, whenever there is that change in name, know that it's the same thing that you must write on. Are you okay? Please don't forget this one. Now, the second dimension is the psychological dimension. So, when we say the psychological dimension, you know what psychology is. Are you okay? So, basically, we are talking about the influences. So, the psychological dimension influences individual understanding of what? Of the world around them. So the psychological dimension, it influences how the individual perform or how the individual behave in the environment. That is the psychological dimension. And it also defines how the person perform in the environment and also how the person see their environment. So when we say the psychological dimension, as I said, it influences the individual understanding of the world. If you are saying something influences our understanding of the world, then it clearly means that the psychological dimension defines how a person performs in the environment and also how the person also sees their environment. That is basically the psychological dimension. Now, as I said, psychological. So it means that the psychological dimension refers to the role of thought. So whenever you are writing anything about the psychological dimension, you have to include these key things I'm going to highlight. The first one is what? Is our thoughts. So our thoughts, our emotions, and also our behavior forms our psychological dimension. So whenever you explain the psychological dimension, you don't have to neglect or ignore the role of thoughts, our behavior, and also our emotions. So our emotions, our behavior, and also our thought forms the psychological dimension. Because if the explanation I said earlier on says that it's about how we see our environment, how can we see our environment? We can see our environment and also we can perform in our environment based on our behavior. One, based on our thought. Two, based on our emotions. Three, so our thoughts, our behavior, and also our emotions are the central things that are very, very important in helping us to perform and also to see our environment. So that is the psychological dimension. So in brief, with the psychological dimension, it's all about the mind-body connection. So when we're talking about the mind-body connection, the connection that exists between the mind and the body, that is the psychological dimension. So the mind-body connection is about the psychological dimension. So that is the second dimension of human behavior. Now, the last dimension that we are going to talk about has to do with the social dimension. So when we say social dimension, what is it? So the social dimension is more of how the individual interacts within the environment. So our social relation, how we relate with one another in the environment, how we communicate with other individuals in the environment. Are you okay? So the social dimension is a very wide concept because it encompasses several factors. Because if you are talking about how we interact, how we communicate in the environment, then it's more of, or more like, let's say, a dialogue. Are you okay? So more like a dialogue. So our social relations, are you okay? Talking about how we relate with one another. Are you okay? Talking also about how we make friends, how we coordinate, how we interact in the environment. That is basically the social dimension. So, in brief, these are the dimensions of human behavior. And we shouldn't forget that when all these dimensions interact, when the biophysical or the biological dimension, the psychological dimension, and the social dimension, when they interact, they form or they create the identity and the personality of individual. So the interaction between these three key dimensions creates the identity and also the personality of individuals. And also, these three dimensions together, they are also called biopsychosocial. So whenever you hear biopsychosocial, or whenever maybe there's a question like explain the biopsychosocial, when you hear something like explain the biopsychosocial approach in understanding or in the study of human behavior, then you know that you are going to explain the dimensions, because the biopsychosocial approach is the same as the biological, the psychological, and also the social dimension of human behavior. So that is the three dimensions. So when they come together, they create the personality and identity of individual, one. And two, together or collectively, they are called the biopsychosocial. Okay, so that is it. And when we say biopsychosocial, it's something, you see, it allows practitioners or social workers to consider diverse ways to assess human behavior. So the biopsychosocial approach allows social workers or practitioners to consider diverse ways in assessing human behavior. Okay, so that is the biopsychosocial. So this is key about the dimension of human behavior. That is very, there are three. I've explained them. Okay. Now, remember the last time too, there was a question like, why must we or why should we study human behavior in their social environment? Okay, as I said, and our exam will take the format of a short answers. So we can be asked this question, that why should human behavior be studied in their social environment? Okay. Now the answer I gave earlier on was very simple. That the reason why we study human behavior in their social environment is that the social environment constantly what changes. So because the social environment constantly changes, it's very, very important that we study human behavior in their social environment, because the environment also defines or influences the behavior of the individual. So because the social environment constantly changes, and it's also intense influences the behavior of the individual, that is why it's very, very important for us to study human behavior in their social environment. So the answer is very, very simple. We study human behavior in their social environment because, one, the social environment constantly changes. So because the social environment constantly changes, that is why we must study human behavior in their social environment. That is one. Two, because the social environment can influence the behavior of the individual. Because the environment can influence our behavior, that is why it's very, very vital for us to study human behavior in their social environment. All right. So that is also very, very key thing that we must know. Yes, it's very important. And I think one key thing that I'm also expecting that we can have something small on it to write has to do with the social environment itself. The social environment. So we know what a social environment is. Are you okay? So when we say a social environment, it refers to the immediate physical and social setting in which human lives and develops. So the immediate physical and social setting in which we live and develop is our social environment. Okay. Now, another name for the social environment is what? Is social context. So the social environment can be referred to as social context or a milieu. So when you hear milieu is the same as what? The social environment. Okay. Now, maybe we can be asked that highlight three examples of social environment. Highlight three examples of social environment. This one, I know everybody or every one of us can give examples of social environment. Okay. So the school is what? Is a social environment. The family is a social environment. Okay. Marketplace is a social environment. Our workplace is also a social environment. Okay. So our church. So all these are examples of what? Social environment. Yes. So we can also be asked to give examples of social environment. And this, I know this one, everybody can actually pull something off about the social environment. So I think that is one key thing that we must know. And I also feel like, I think, okay, this one, I think when I'm concluding, I'll show you, I have to show you a picture of it. All right. Now, I think one key area that it's very, very important that we must, yes, I have seen someone saying church. Yes. So church is also a social environment. That's very true. All right. So please, if you just join, kindly make sure you like the session. Okay. Kindly like the session. All right. Now, one area that I'm also very positive that we will have question on them has to do with the theories. Okay. So the application of theories to practice. So the three key theories, we did all of them. We did all the theories in class. So the theories, we will definitely have questions on the theories. And we know them, the system theory, the ecological theory, and also the conflict theory. So these three key theories, we will definitely have questions on them. So now let me just run us through the theories. Now, the first theory is what? Is the system theory. And I hope you all know what a system theory is. So when we say a system theory talks about how the individual units within the system interrelate, interdepend, and also interconnect with each other. Are you okay? So when we are talking about a system theory, we are making references to how the individual units within a family or within a system, how the individual components interrelate, interdepend, and also interconnect with each other. That is what? That is the system theory. Yes, system theory. So system theory is basically talking about a system that is based on the idea that human behavior is influenced by a variety of factors. And all these factors stick together or they come together to form a whole. Okay, so that is the system theory. So if you don't know anything about system theory, don't forget interconnectedness, interrelated, and also what? Interdependent. If you don't even recall anything, just write these three key things. You are correct. Okay. So when you hear system theory, we are talking about how the individual components within a system, how they are interrelated, how they are interdependent, and also how they interconnect among each other. So that is a system theory. Now, one will ask, why must we use system theory? So that is the relevance of system theory in what? Human behavior. So system theories are very, very important, and we must use them in this because of this what? Particular reasons. So we must use system theory because one, system theory provides coping strategies. So a system theory provides coping strategies. So it provides strategies that enables the individual to cope within the environment. Why? Because if the system are interrelated, it means that if you are facing some difficulties, another component within the system will come and support you. Okay, and that is a coping strategy. So system theory provides a coping strategies. That is why we must use a system theory, or that is what its significance. That is the first one. Two, system theory also links people with systems. A system theory links people with systems. So what is this point trying to say? So when we say a system theory links people with systems, it is trying to say that within a system theory, since the individual components are interrelated, since they are all interconnected, then it simply means that when one is failing to function, it affects the other system. So for instance, let's say you are having a car. You see, a car is a system. Now, for the car to be able to move, we should have a steering. We should have petrol in the car. We should have the tires being pumped and active. Okay. And also we should have the driver inside the car. Now, if one of these things I've mentioned is not functioning well, it will affect the entire system. That is the system theory. Okay. So that is the system theory. So when we say a system theory, why we must use a system theory? We are saying that system theory links people with systems, meaning that it helps people to associate themselves with a system that are functionable. Okay, so that is the system theory. Now, another reasons why we must use the system approach or the system theory is that it provides better access to resources. The system theory provides a better access to resources. So if we say the system theory provides a better access to resources, what are we trying to say? Don't forget that the whole system are interdependent on each other. So it means that if one is lacking, the other system is having. Are you okay? So it provides a better access to resources. So since we are all interconnected, so let me give this example. So you see right now, we are all on the page that's tutorial with manual. Now let's say if you are going to write any exam and I feel like, okay, this question it might come, I can put that question on that page. And you see, so that page is a system. Okay. Now I am also I'm a part of that system. So if I put a question on that system, it means that all of you on that page, you are having access to that resources. And what is that resources? That resources is the question that I'm putting on the page. Okay, so that is the system theory. So system theory also provides a better access to resources. Okay, so these are the reasons why we must use the system theory. Now, under the system theory, we have main systems. Okay, we have main systems under the system theory. And what are these main systems? The main systems includes we have the microsystem. The microsystem is is one main system. We have the mesosystem and also the macro system. So we should also understand the differences between all these kind of systems under system theory. So when we say a microsystem, what is a microsystem? So at the micro level, it is when we are dealing with individuals. Okay. So when we are dealing with individuals and that is working at the micro level. So at the micro level, we are having a face-to-face interaction with individuals. So the micro level is the same as casework. When we are having a face-to-face interaction with people, that is the micro level of practice. So at the micro level, we are working with individuals and also we are working with families. So when you're working with individuals and families, and it is usually a face-to-face interaction, that is the micro level of practice. Now, the second level is the meso level. The meso level. So when we say working at the meso level, it means that when we are working with groups, okay, so when we are working with groups, we are working at the meso level. Working with groups means that we are working at the meso level. That is working with groups. Now, at the meso level, what are the key things that are very, very important there? So if somebody is working at the meso level, it means that we are working through personal networks. So at the meso level, one key thing that is very, very important there is that at the meso level, we work through networks. That is personal networks. So through networks, That is how the meso level functions or how it works. So when we are working with smaller groups, when you are working with institutions like schools, when you are working at the workplace, and okay, when we are interacting with all these people at these places, that is working at the meso level. And it's usually done through personal networks. So if we are explaining the meso level, we shouldn't omit networks or personal networks. So that is working at the meso level. Now, the last level has to do with the macro level. So, at the macro level, it involves an intervention that benefits the entire society. So, when we are rolling or when we are coming with an intervention that benefits the whole society, that is what working at the macro level. For instance, if we are building a healthcare facility at a particular community, that facility is not someone's property. It belongs to everybody within the society or within that community. So that intervention is can be termed as what? As a macro level intervention. Why? Because it is something that is affecting the entire community. Okay, so that is a macro level of practice. So at the macro level, we are working with the entire community as a whole. That is the macro level of practice. So these are the difference between the various levels of or the various systems through which we operate under human behavior. That is the micro level, the meso level, and also the macro level. Okay, so these are the three key main levels in which we practice. Okay, now I said, so when we are also talking about the system theory, you see all this I'm highlighting, they are all under the system theory. Okay, with all this I'm talking about, they are all under the system theory. So the system theory is we are saying that say a system is effective. When we say a system is effective, what makes a system effective? So an effective system is based on what? Individual needs. Listen to this very, very well. When we say a system is effective, what are we trying to say? A system is effective, one, when that system is based on individual needs. Two, when it's based on rewards. Three, when it's based on what expectations. So an effective system is based on three key things. An effective system is based on individual needs, individual expectations, and also individual rewards. Don't forget these three. An effective system is based on three key things. An effective system is based on individual needs, individual rewards, and also individual expectations. So these are the three key things that effective system are based on or is based on. Okay, let's not forget. Let's not forget this one. It's very, very important. System theory. Don't forget system theory. Okay. All right. So that is brief about the system theory. Now let's move on to the second theory. Okay. So the second theory is the person in environment theory. Okay. The person in environment theory. So when we say the person environment theory, this theory is designed to assess problems in social functioning. The person environment theory is designed to assess problem in social functioning. Don't forget this one. That the person in environment theory is designed to assess problem in social functioning. Let me explain or let me give more context to what I've just said. So when I say the person environment theory is designed to assess problem in social functioning, I'm trying to say that this person environment theory help us to understand individuals' behavior in the environment. The person environment theory help us to understand individual behavior in light of the environment. Okay, so it helps us to understand how the individual lives, how the individual performs, how the individual functions within the environment. That is the person in environment theory. So if I say it is designed to assess problems in social functioning. I'm trying to say that it helps us to understand individuals' behavior in light of the environment. Okay, that is how the individual performs, how the individual functions, and also how the individual lives within the environment. And this theory has an assumption that the individual's behavior is heavily influenced by the environment, and the environment is also heavily influenced by the individual behavior. So it's like it takes things. The person environment theory has an assumption that, or comes with the assumption that, the individual behavior is heavily influenced by the environment, and the environment in turn also influences the individual behavior. So that is the person in environment theory. Please, are you good with the person environment theory? Please, are you good with that one? The explanation on the person environment theory. Are you good with the explanation on the person environment theory? Let me hear from you if you are fine, so I can proceed. Okay. Okay, so someone is saying no. Teresa is saying no. Okay. So Teresa, I'm saying that when we say the person environment theory, okay, the person environment theory is basically a theory that is, so let me make it very simple for you to understand. So when we say a person environment theory, it is basically on the notion that the individual behavior is influenced by the environment, and the environment is also what? Influenced by the individual behavior. Okay. So when we say, okay, all right. So when we say the person environment theory is basically a theory that helps us to understand individual behavior in the environment. So that's the person, that's a simple definition of what? A person environment theory. So the person environment theory help us to understand human behavior in the what? In the environment. Please, is it one okay? So this is just the brief explanation of a person environment theory. So a person environment theory help us to understand individual behavior in light of the environment, or it help us to understand individual behavior in the environment. Okay, so that's the person environment theory. All right. Now, the person environment theory uses four factors to determine client problem. Please listen. What I'm going to talk about right now, I'm very sure it will come, and it will come because it's another person environment theory. I'm very sure it will come. So please, after this session, maybe you can go to your slides, then you read about it. Okay. But I'm going to explain. So maybe you can just explain and jot something down. So the person environment theory uses four factors to determine client problem. Okay. The same thing. So the person environment theory uses four factors to determine client problem. I'm sure my boss can ask you about this side I'm going to talk about. There are four factors that determine client problem under the person environment theory. This one is very, very important. Okay. Now, the first factor is what? Is social role problems. The first one is social role problems. The second one is environmental problems. That's the second one. The third one is mental disorder. And the final one is physical disorder. So please listen. The person environment theory uses four factors to determine client's problem. And what are these factors? The first factor is what? Is social role problems. The second factor is environmental problems. The third factor is mental disorder. And the last factor is physical disorder. Now I'm going to explain them to you. Okay. So you see, the first two, the first two, that is the social role problems and the environmental problems. That is the first two. So the first two improves social functioning. That is the social role problems and the environmental problem. That is the first two. So the first two of the factors helps improve social functioning. That's the first two. And the last two, Okay, so the last two, that is the mental disorder and the physical disorder, they also affect social functioning. Listen, we have four main factors that determines a client problem. And I've mentioned the four factors. We have the social role problems, the environmental problems, the mental disorder, and the physical disorder. And now I'm categorizing them into two. That the first two, that's the social role problem and also the environmental problems. The two of them improves social functioning. So social role and also environmental, the two helps improve social functioning. But then the mental disorder and also the physical disorder, they also affect social functioning. So as the first two is helping us to improve social functioning, the last two is what? Is affecting social functioning. Okay. And now all the four that we've highlighted, that is the social role problem, the environmental problems, the mental disorder, and the physical disorder, they are all necessary for describing client problem. So all these factors help social workers to improve or to describe client problem. Okay, the four factors help practitioners or social workers to describe client problem. So the first one is the social role problems. So with the social role problems, we are looking at the role that the individual is playing. Okay, now we know that when we perform roles, it helps improve our social functioning. So it means that if the individual is facing issue in performing their role, the social role problem will help us to understand that problem the client is facing. That's one. Two, the second one is what? Is environmental problems. And the environmental problems is we are looking at how the individual functions in the environment. Okay. Now, if the environment is affecting how the individual perform in the environment, we will use the environmental factor to help us to understand the problem the individual is facing in the environment. That is the second one. Now, the third one is mental disorder. Now, anything disorder is something that affects one's social functioning. Anything that is a disorder is something that affects social functioning. Now, both the mental and also the physical disorder, that's the last two, affect social functioning. And if we want to explain or if you want to describe client's problem regarding their mental disorder, we will use the mental disorder function to help us understand what the client is going through. That's what the client is thinking, the thought of the client, are you okay? How their mental state is. So the mental disorder as a factor will help us to explain will help us explain the the last two, that is the mental disorder and also the physical disorder. Are you okay? So that is the two. Now we have the four main factors that determine client problem, and I've explained the four main factors to you. Okay, I've explained the four main factors to you, so don't forget them. Okay, don't forget them. All right. As I said, this one I'm very sure it may come or it might come. So make sure, please, you really read there well. Okay, the four factors. Make sure you read there very, very well. All right. Now, that is all under the person environment theory. That's the second one. That's all under that one. Now, the last theory we will talk about is what? Is the conflict theory. Conflict theory. Okay. So the conflict theory is the last theory that we will talk about. Now, when we say conflict theory, we all know what a conflict does. Okay. So conflict is something that creates, let's say, confusion or misunderstanding between two parties. Okay, so someone is saying, what is the difference between the person environment theory and the ecological theory? Please, they are all the same. Okay, the person environment theory and the ecological theory, they are all the same. So sometimes when you hear pi or ecological theory, they are all the same. So maybe in exam or going tomorrow, if you don't see, maybe explain the person environment theory and you find um, what is the ecological theory? Please, they are all the same. So the ecological theory is the same as the person in environment theory. Okay. So thank you very much, Lord, for that. question. All right. So that is it. So please, they are all the same. Okay, they are all the same. Now, the last theory I was talking about is um, was the conflict theory. So when we say conflict theory, we know conflict theory. Who was the propounder of the conflict theory? That was by Karl Marx. Okay, conflict theory is talking about we are talking about how the kind of pressure and also the misunderstanding that exists between two parties. That is the conflict theory. Okay. Now we know that as individuals, we cannot live without conflict because conflict is inevitable. Conflict is something that is part of us. Okay. And conflict is basically the lack of consensus. So when two parties are not able to agree on something, that thing will create conflict. So the lack of consensus creates conflict. The lack of consensus creates conflict. So whenever there is no agreement about something, now the aftermath of that thing is what? Is conflict. And as I said, once we are humans, we cannot do without conflict. Definitely, someone will step on your toe, and if the person does not apologize to you, it will create misunderstanding and it will lead to conflict. Okay. Now, conflict can occur between so many places. Are you okay? So conflict can occur within departments. Are you okay? Now, let's say our department, that Department of Sociology and Social Work, the conflict can occur there. Because if, let's say, um, people or some of the workers, they fail to perform what they're supposed to do, it can create conflict. Are you okay? Conflict can also occur within organizations. So, and also even within our families, even among ourselves, conflict can occur. Okay. So conflict is, as I said, conflict is inevitable. Once we are humans, we cannot do without conflict. Conflict can actually occur at any point in place and also at any given point in time. That is what conflict. Now, we have some types of conflicts under the conflict theory. Now, what are these type of conflict? There are four. The first one is what? Is interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict. Now, the second one is role conflict. Role conflict. The third one is intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict. And the last one is maturity and immaturity. So maturity and immaturity can also actually create conflict. Now we are going to explain all of them one after the other. Okay. So please, if you just join, kindly make sure you like the session. Okay. Let's like the session as we join the session. All right. Now let's take the first one, the first type of conflict. So the first type of conflict is what? Interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict. So when we say a conflict is interpersonal, that is a conflict between individuals within an organization. So when there's a conflict between individuals within an organization, that is what? An interpersonal conflict. Conflict within an individual or conflict between individuals within an organization is what? Interpersonal conflict. Conflict between individuals within an organization is interpersonal conflict. Okay. Now, when let's say myself and let's say hero, or let's say myself and international, there is some misunderstanding. Maybe we were having some conversation. So while we were having the conversation, maybe there were some small hitches or some small misunderstanding among us, and that thing can cause friction. So when there's a friction between two individuals or two parties, it can actually lead to what? To interpersonal conflict. So the conflict between individuals within the family or within an organization is interpersonal conflict. Okay. Now, when there's an interpersonal conflict, who can come in to solve this kind of conflict? So, whenever there's an interpersonal conflict, let's say within or an organization, managers can come in to solve this type of conflict. Okay. So, let's say we are at the Department of Sociology and Social Work, and now let's say there's a conflict between, let's say one of the workers and also the students within the department. Now, the HOD can come into these two parties and help address what? This conflict between them, okay, can come and help address this conflict between them. So that is one. So managers can come in to solve this conflict, or even individuals. So let's say you are three friends and two of your friends, they are fighting, or maybe they are having some misunderstanding. So the third party, you can come in to help um, make sure that they reach consensus to bring down tension, so that you can mediate between these two bodies. Okay. All right. So, Lord, I've seen your question. Grace, I've seen your question. I'll address them. Okay. I'll address all of them. I've seen your questions. I'll address them. Yes, I even have them here, so I'll address them. Don't worry. All right. All right. So now that is um, the explanation for the interpersonal conflict. Okay. So when we say something is interpersonal, is something that exists between two individuals. Okay, that is interpersonal. Two individuals within a family or an organization. Now, the second type of conflict is role conflict. Role conflict. So when we say a role conflict occurs among employees, and it is caused by circumstances related to roles and duties. So when the role and also the duties that individual perform create conflict for them, that is what role conflict. Now let me give you example. So let's say you are a mother, okay? You are a mother of, let's say, two children. And no, you see, as a mother, you have to always be at home and cook for your children to eat. That is your role. But then you also have a work that you are doing. And at workplace, so you also have a role that you play there. Now, let's say at the workplace, normally you normally close at, let's say, 3 p.m. Then you use, let's say, 1 hour to get to the house so that you can cook for your children to eat. Now you are performing two roles. But let's say one time you had, let's say, um, an overwork. There was an overload of work, and you couldn't close at, let's say, the 3 p.m. that you normally close. You see, now if you were not able to close at 3 p.m., and maybe you have to, maybe your supervisor say that, okay, now we are having our externals coming to us, so today we will not close early, we will all stay behind and work, and we will close at 6 p.m. So you see, you are a mother as well, you have a role that you play at the house. You have to go and cook for your children. Now at workplace too, you have to also work there, you have a role that you're also playing there. Now let's say what your supervisor told you, now it creating what? A role conflict. Why? Because normally at workplace you used to close at 3 and go home at 4. You reach home at 4 and cook for your children to eat. But now your boss is saying that today you have to stay behind and close at 6. So you see, now you will be contemplating on what to do. Either you stay at work or you go home and cook what? For your children. That is role conflict. So when we say role conflict, is a type of conflict that is caused by what? Circumstances surrounding or related to our roles that we perform. So the mother is performing the role of a mother at home, and also she's also an employee at a certain workplace. Now she's performing two roles. So if there's a clash of maybe duties among these two roles, that's role conflict. When the mother is in between selecting going to the house to cook for the children or staying behind and work for her boss. Are you okay? Now, this is a role conflict. When an employee, are you okay, is having difficulties or circumstances surrounding her or his role that they play at the workplace, that is a role conflict. So role conflict occurs among employees, and it is caused by what? Circumstances related to the role that they perform. That is role conflict. And I've actually given you examples to explain for you to understand the role conflict. Okay. Now that is the role conflict. That is the explanation. Now the third type of conflict is what? intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict. So when we say intergroup conflict, it means it's a type of conflict that occurs through neither party's form, or it's a type of conflict that occurs among two groups. Okay, now let's say we have the Department of Sociology and also the Department of Geography. They are all several groups. Okay, when there's misunderstanding between these two departments, is what is intergroup conflict, because they are all having their own roles that they are playing. They are all different, and now they are having this misunderstanding between them. Okay, now when such occurs, it means that it will need someone to come in to mediate. So whenever there's an intergroup conflict, it requires mediation, someone or a third party to come in. Now let's say there's misunderstanding between the Department of Sociology and Social Work and also the Department of Geography. Now let's say the Dean of Students can come in as a mediator to help mediate between these two departments. So when we say intergroup conflict, the conflict that occurs among or between two groups. Okay, so when there's a friction between two groups, that is what intergroup conflict. And it always requires resolution through mediation. It always requires what? Resolution through mediation. Okay, now intergroup conflict can be very, very destructive, because whenever there's an intergroup conflict, know that it always affects large number of people. Okay, because the department, there are several people there under the department, and if the two departments are having issues, it will affect a whole number of number of people. Okay, so that is an intergroup conflict. So with intergroup conflict, it's a conflict that exists between two groups, two different groups, or two different entities. That is what an intergroup conflict. Conflict that occurs among two different groups or two different entities is intergroup conflict. And this type of conflict always requires resolution by mediation. So it requires somebody to come in to resolve this type of conflict among these two particular groups that we are talking about. So that is intergroup conflict. Now, the last type of conflict that we are going to talk about is maturity and immaturity. Maturity and immaturity. So this particular type of conflict is actually talking about um, some characteristics of a matured person, and also characteristics of what someone who is immature. So when we say someone is mature, what are some of the characteristics of that person? Oh, let's say, oh, this guy is very matured. Oh, this lady is very matured. So when we say someone is mature, it means that that person is very active. So mature individuals or a matured person is very active. That is one, active. Two, the person is what? Is independent. So anyone who is matured is what? Is independent. Three, the person has what? Self-control. Any matured person has self-control. They know how to control themselves. So that is three. And four, the person is confident. So these are the characteristics of what? A matured person. So any matured person is one, is active. Two, is independent. Three, has self-control. And four, is confident. So these are the characteristics of what? Of maturity. Now, when we say immaturity, that is the opposite of maturity. So immaturity means that immature person is someone who is passive. So when someone is not active, the person is passive. That is what immature person. So an immature person is passive. That is one. Two, the person is dependent. Three, the person had lack confidence, and also the person has no self-control. That is what the characteristics of what immaturity or immature person. And mind you, all this can actually create conflict. When someone acts immature, it can create conflict. Are you okay? Okay. I'm saying that when we say maturity and immaturity conflict, We are talking about the characteristics that can create conflict. So, what are the characteristics or features of a matured person? So, a matured person has some key characteristics, and these are: one, a matured person is active. Okay. Two, a matured person is independent. Three, a mature person is has self-control. Four, a matured person has confidence. Okay, has confidence. And we can also add that a mature person also has what? Has positive self-esteem. They have positive self-esteem. Are you okay? That is the characteristics of what? Of maturity or a matured person. Now, when we say immaturity, immaturity, that is someone who is immature. So an immature person is what? Is passive. That is one, is passive. Two, an immature person is dependent. Three, an immature person lacks confidence, and also they have what? Low self-esteem. Okay. And all these characteristics can actually create conflict, because if someone is what? Maybe if someone lacks confidence, that thing can actually create conflict. And if someone acts immaturely, that thing can also create conflict. So with the maturity and immaturity, we are saying that they are the type of conflict that arises both internally and externally. So maturity and immaturity are what? The type of conflict that arises both maturity and what? Sorry, both internally and what? Externally. So when we say maturity and immaturity conflict, they are the type of conflict that arises both internally and externally. Okay, so based on the characteristics, now you can actually know if you belong to A or you belong to B. Okay, okay, this one there, power to the masses. All right, so that is the last type of conflict, that is maturity and immaturity. All right, so that one there, power to the people. So you decide. All right, so please, if you just join, kindly make sure you like the session for us. Okay, kindly like the session. All right, now maybe we can have this question. As I said, since it is um just short answers, we can maybe we can be asked this question, that how do you handle conflict in social work? So how can we handle conflict in social work? Okay, how can we handle conflict in social work? So that is conflict resolution in social work. That's the simple definition or the simple meaning of this question. So how do we handle conflict in social work? So please now let's write the answers to this question. So you can write the question, how do you handle conflict in social work? You can write that question. How do you handle conflict in social work? Okay. How do you handle conflict in social work? All right. So please, if you join, make sure you like the session. Okay. If you just join, make sure you like, and if already joined and you haven't liked the session, make sure you like the session. All right. Now, how do we handle conflict in social work? So we handle conflict in social work in several ways. So the first one is one. So for you to handle conflict in social work, one, we begin by what? By confrontation. Okay, so we begin by confrontation. So through confrontation, we try to address who the conflict is with. So we handle conflict in social work through confrontation. So when we confront the parties involved in the conflict, we will be able to know what is causing the conflict, or who is at fault and who is not at fault. And through that, we can handle the conflict. So we handle conflict in social work through what? Confrontation. Confrontation. So when we confront the individuals with, that are going through the conflict or misunderstanding, through that we can help address or handle the conflict. So the first one is what? Confrontation. So that is one. Now, how can we also handle conflict aside confrontation. So aside confrontation, we also have to emphasize the importance of communication. So emphasizing the importance of communication can help you handle conflict in social work. Emphasizing the importance of communication. So when we emphasize the importance of communication, we can actually handle conflict in social work. Emphasize the importance of communication. That's two. That's the point number two. Now, how can we also handle conflict in social work? Okay, so we can also handle conflict in social work when we empathize with the opponent. So that's empathy. So we can handle conflict through empathy. Empathy. So when we empathize with the opponent, we can actually handle the conflict. So we can handle the conflict through empathy. So empathy. When we empathize with the opponent, we can solve the conflict. Okay, that is empathy. Empathy. Okay. Now, these are some of the ways that we can handle um, conflicts in social work. Okay, that is how we can handle conflicts in social work. All right, that's very, very important. All right. Now, I also feel like we should know this one. Okay, I think the last time the last time Doc came to class, she was asking, I think she was asking the difference between growth and development. Okay, maybe we don't, you see, right now you don't know what to expect, so you have to know everything. Okay, the difference between growth and development. So we should know the difference between the two. Okay, now let's do something quick on them. So growth and development. Okay, so when we say growth, what are the difference between growth and development? So one, growth is more external. So growth is external and development is internal. That's the first difference between them. So growth is more external because with growth is about the physical changes. Okay, growth is about the physical changes. So growth is more external, but then development is more internal. Development is more internal. Okay, now that's the first difference between the two. Now, number two difference is that growth is quantitative. Okay, growth is quantitative. Growth is quantitative. Growth is quantitative. But then development is both quantitative and qualitative. Okay, so if growth is quantitative, development is both quantitative and qualitative. Don't forget. And why are we saying growth is quantitative? When we say quantitative, it's something that you can, like, it's something that is visible. Okay, something that is visible, that deals with numbers. Something that deals with numbers. Okay, so that is also one thing, one difference among them. Now, the third difference between growth and development is that with growth, growth is about increase in size. Okay, so increase in size is growth. So when one is increasing in size, it's growth. Maybe you see somebody, hey, Charlie, you are getting big, or you are getting this, or you are getting lean, or that is growth. Okay. Now, when we say development, development is increase in our physical, our emotional, and also what our cognitive dimension or aspect. So growth is only increase in size, but then development is an increase in our physical, our emotional, and also our cognitive being. So development is more advanced than what? Than growth. Okay. So growth is increase in size, but then development is increase in physical, emotional, and cognitive dimension. Now, the last difference is that growth is narrow. Growth is narrow, but then development is wider. development is wider because development is more complex. Okay, so growth is narrow, but then development is wider. So that was just by the way. I actually wanted to you guys to know the difference between growth and development. As I said, we don't know what to expect, so we should know everything. All right, all right. Now, I think um, please this question there, power to the people. Okay, power to the people. Okay, so you see, is there what about the short and smallest people in our life? So you see, the short and smallest people in our life, that is what you are seeing. So what you are seeing is the growth. They are short. But then when it comes to development, even though they are short, but then their mind, the way they reason is much more than their stature. Are you okay? Okay. So that is it. So know that. So growth is more external, but then development is more internal. Okay, development is more internal. All right. So I think that is also one aspect I also has to know. And um, okay, you let me finish this. Then we go to the questions. I think the questions. One, so one area to I remember. I think this one. I remember Doug was also talking about this area. So you see, under the psychodynamic theory, Doug was okay. So Noah, they have both development and growth. So what you are seeing them, you see them as smallish, and that's physical features. So that is the growth. Okay, but then when it comes to development, you can't see the development because how their mind is developing, you are not seeing how they are reasoning, how they are able to take on tasks. Are you okay? How they are, because let's look at these short people that we normally see. You see, even though they are short, but then they perform some roles. So development is about our ability to take on different kind of roles or duties or responsibilities. That development. Because when a child is, let's say, 5 years, maybe the child cannot do anything. But then when the child is like 12 years, now the child will be able to maybe begin to sweep. You people, power to the people. Okay, I won't comment again. So, all right. So that is it. That's the difference between growth and development. Okay. Okay. Hmm. Munyo, you guys, you are no good. Eh? You are no good at all. You guys are no good. What you are saying? Eh? This one power to the people. My Rasta, my Rasta, Charlie. I won't mind you guys. All right. Now you see, under the under the psychodynamic theory, God will punish all of you. God will now under the psychoanalytic theory, I don't even know what to say. Under the psychodynamic theory, if if you guys remember, Doug was talking about the ID, the ego, and the super ego. If you remember, under that one too, I'm very sure a question can under the psychodynamic theory. Doug was explaining something about the ID or the id, the ego, and the super ego. Hey, Charlie, you guys, why? Hey, Solo, we won, okay? the the ego, the super ego, and the id. Okay, so that is that is one thing under the psychodynamic theory. I remember when Doug was explaining, Doug was mentioning something about these three key things, and they are the personality structure. Personality structure. So under the personality structure, we were having the ID or the id, the ego, and the super ego. Okay, this one too, please, we must know the difference between them. The difference between the ego, the super ego, and also the id or the ID. Now let me just brush them off right now. So as I said, they are all under the psychodynamic theory, where we were learning about the personality structure. So we have three personality structures. That is the id, the ego, and the superego. They are three. Now let me take them one after the other. So when we say the id is the most primitive part of human personality. Hey, I mean, those having problems with their hair. Okay, so Thomas, so this your question. I think is a problem. So I think it's a biological problem. Okay, so it's a disorder, or maybe it's a genetic disorder. So it's a biological problem. So we can categorize your question under biological dimension. Thomas, I hope you are fine. So we can classify this under the biological dimension. Okay. Okay. So international is psychodynamic theory. Okay. Psychodynamic theory. Psychodynamic theory. Okay. International, I hope you are fine. Psychodynamic theory. All right. Now, under the psychodynamic theory, we have personality structure. And under the personality structure, we have the id, the ego, and the superego. So I'm explaining the three to you guys. So when we say the id, we are saying that the id is what is the most primitive part of human personality. So the most primitive part of human personality is the id, or the id. The id. The id is the most what? Primitive part of what? Human personality. And the id operates on pleasure principles. The id operates on pleasure principles. If I say the id operates on pleasure principles, what am I trying to say? The id always demands immediate gratification. Okay? The id always demands immediate gratification. So, or immediate pleasure. That is why the id operates, or it functions on the pleasure principles. Now, let me give you an example. The id, as a rule, the id is the most primitive part of human personality, and the id operates on pleasure principles. So the id always demand immediate gratification or desires. So for instance, you see sometimes maybe you are there, and let's say a lady is going, and maybe your eye will go and flash on the lady's back. And now something will be ringing in your mind that go and smash the lady's buttocks. That is the work of the id. Okay, so for the id, it operates on pleasure principle. So anything that will make you like, you see, that is the work of the id. And for the id to, anything that it wants you to do, it wants you to do it as early as possible. Okay, that is the function of the id. So the id always demands immediate desire or immediate gratification. Sometimes maybe you see somebody, you see, for instance, those that they always um, convict them for defilement cases. These people, is always the work of their id, because they were not able to regulate their id. That is why they find themselves in defilement cases. Because maybe they are there, and one lady, the lady might be small, let's say 12, 13 years, they will wear some apuskeliki, and they will be passing there. Now their eyes will flash on them, and now they will develop this desire to have affection with them. Okay, and now when they go and have affection with them, they will just get themselves arrested. Okay, so that is the work of the id. So the id operates on pleasure principle, and it always demands immediate gratification. That is, whenever it comes to your mind, it wants you to go and do it, whether it is bad or it's something. It don't care. Okay, so we can say the id is a devil. It always creates problem for human beings. As I said, you are there, and maybe you are even hungry. You are there, and one lady is wearing a puskeleke going, short skirt going, and now your eye will go and smash on or flash on that skirt or that apuskeleke, and now you don't know, you can't even contain yourself. You want to go and smash on the ladies' buttocks. That's the work of the id. So with the id is devil. It always wants you to push you into problem. Okay, or for so so the 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 id always wants to create problems. Okay, so as I said, if you go to prisons, about 90% of the prisoners who are facing defilement or rape cases is the work of the id, because they were not able to regulate their id. Now they were able to do they were able to what, to go and satisfy their id. So when you go and satisfy your id, now you find yourself in trouble. Okay, so that is the work of the id. So the id always demands immediate gratification, immediate desire. Okay, and also the id operates on what, pleasure principle. So sometimes if you are there and something will come to mind, Charlie, go and rape someone, go and rape someone, go and rape someone. If you are not able to regulate yourself and you go and rape someone, you will find yourself in prison. And now that prison. So you see, for the id, when it comes, like you that time you don't reason about anything. That time your mind is gone. You don't know what is right. So like you see, like like the thief, when they're going to steal, at that time is the id that is pushing them, go and steal, go and steal, go and steal. Now that time you don't have anything, there's nothing going on in your mind. All that's going to your mind is that go and steal, go and steal, go and steal. Okay, okay. Now when you go and steal, you find yourself in prison. Okay, so that is it. So that is the work of the id. Now the second personality structure is what? Is the ego. Okay, is the ego. Now with the ego, we are saying that the ego, the function of the ego is to mediate what? The id. So the work of the ego is to regulate the id. To regulate the id. So the ego is there, and the ego operates on reality principle. The ego operates on reality principle. So let's say you are there, this time you are there and you have some thought that, okay, go and steal, go and steal. Now you hear another voice that, no, if you go and steal, you might be caught. And when you are caught, it can either beat you and you'll be killed, or you'll be sent to prison. Now that is the work of the ego. Now the ego operates on what? Reality principle. The ego will let you know that these are the consequences of you going to rape that child. These are the consequences of you going to what? Steal someone's phone. That if you go and steal, they will catch you. And when they catch you, if they don't beat you up and you die, they will what? Send you to prison. So the ego always mediates and what? Regulates the id. That is why we are saying the ego operates on what? Reality principle. So the ego will let you know the reality that, hey, Charlie, that fucking mind that's going through your mind, that fucking ideas that you are having, these are the consequences. So if you go and steal, they what? They will lynch you. Or if you go and steal, they will send you to prison. Okay, so so it means that the ego don't have sense. Yes, so David, so that is it. So it means the ego don't have sense. So so it means the E don't have sense. Yes, so we can say that way. Okay, so David, we can say the E don't have sense. So with the E, when it comes to you, you don't think about anything. When it comes to you, your sense are gone. Unless after you've gone and steal and they catch you and beat you, now your sense will come. Or after you go and rape someone and you are taken to prison, now that's when your sense will come. So with the id, when the id is talking to you, your sense will vanish, because it just wants you to go and do, like, go and rape the girl, go and steal, go and steal. That's the work of the id. But the work of the ego is to help what? Regulate the id. So the ego operates on reality principle. So the ego will be like, Charlie, if you go and steal, these are the reality. You might be caught and they can beat you and you will die. Okay. I said, "Whoa, these guys, I won't mind you." So please, I hope you are fine. Now, the last one is the super ego. Okay, so with the super ego operates on what? On morality principle. So the super ego is something that mediates between the id and what? And the super and the ego. So the super ego is it operates on what? On moral grounds. Okay, that is the work of the super ego. It operates on what? Morality principle. So as the id operates on pleasure principle, the ego operates on what? Reality principle. And the super ego operates on morality principle. So the super ego will let you know that, hey, you are in examination hall and you want to go and cheat. If you cheat, these are the consequences. So that's the work of what? Of the super ego. It operates on morals, that we are saying that we shouldn't cheat in an examination hall. So if you cheat, they will take your paper and they will tear your paper into pieces. Or if you cheat, they will sack you. So we can say the ego is an angel, as someone is saying, it's fine. Okay, yes. But then the real angel is the super ego. All right. The real angel is the super ego, because the super ego operates on what? On moral principles. Moral principles. What is right? What is not right? Okay. But then the ego operates on reality. What is the reality? The reality is that if you steal and they catch you, they will beat you. That's the reality. Okay. Okay. Super angel. Hey, you. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. That is it. So maybe we can be asked a question like, what is the role of the, please listen, we can be asked this question: what is the role of the id, the ego, and also the super ego in relation to human behavior? What is the role of the id, the ego, and super ego in relation to human behavior? So if you are asked this question, that what is the role of the id, the ego, and super ego in relation to human behavior, this is how we are going to explain it. Are you okay? So you just explain them that the id provides drives for behavior. Are you okay? So the id provides drives for behavior. And what are these drives? They are negative drives. Okay. And also the ego works to balance between what? The need of, or the demands of the id. So the ego works to balance the need or the desires of what? Of the id. And the superego strives on moral perfection. So the superego work is on moral perfection. What is morally right and what morally wrong? That is the work of the superego. So that is it. Now we just have to know them. Please, it's very, very important. Okay. All right. Now let's, I think there is something I want to um I'm coming here. I'm coming. Under the personal environment theory, there are some five key things. Okay, I want us to go through them. They are very important. You see, we are under the personal environment theory. We have the chrono system, the micro. See, those things, they are very, very important, and I think maybe they might come. Maybe they might come that we should explain the major systems under the um. Okay, I think I'm coming. I'm coming. Yes, in this one, I want to just put the cursor on it so that you know what I'm explaining. I think this one, if you explain all of them, all of them, if you explain all of them. Oh, no, it's not this one. I want this one. Put this one. Okay, you see all this that's going. If you explain all of them, if you explain all of them, if you explain all of them, if you explain. Yes. So you see, ecological theory. So the ecological theory is the same as the person and environment theory. Don't forget. Okay. Your ID is telling you to steal our food now. What about them? You. Why this telling you? Okay, so please this one. See the five dimensions under the ecological theory. Okay, so under the ecological theory, it has some dimensions under it. Okay, now we have the micro system, the meso system, the exo, the macro, and the chrono system. So these ones, too, please, they are very important. So now let's just go to them. Okay, I know you know what the micro system because I've already explained the micro system. Okay, so when we are working with our immediate environment, okay, when we're working with our immediate environment, that is the micro system. So working with individuals and also families, that is our micro system. Okay, now I won't waste my time here. Now, when we say meso, okay, meso. So meso is what? Is the interaction of different microsystems. So interaction between two or more environmental settings in which people live. Okay. So when we say meso system, so let's say when two families, so let's say we have the family of, let's say, Ajamine and the family of Osei, you see, they are all microsystems. So when these two families are coming together to do something, that is the meso system. Okay. So with the meso is what? Is the interaction among two or more environmental settings in which people live. Okay. So the interaction of different microsystems. So when two microsystems comes together to interact, that is the meso system. That's the meso. Okay, meso. Now let's move on to the third one. The third one is exo. Okay, exo. So the exo system. So when we say exo system, it pertains to the linkage that may exist between two or more settings. All right. So one of which may not contain the individual but still affect the individual nonetheless. He said, this look at the example dog gave. He said a parent's anger due to employment and hitting their kid. Okay. Now let's say you went to work, and now when you went to work, you had some issues with your co-worker at the workplace. Now that is the ESO system I'm explaining. You went to work and you had an issue with your co-worker, and that thing has developed an anger within you. Now you see, when you have anger and you come to the house, if your child say anything that's not even demand any insult, you insult the child because right from the workplace, you develop some anger within you. Okay, that is the ESO system. So he said that it pertains to what the linkage that may exist between two or more settings, one of which may not contain the individual, but still affect the individual nonetheless. So when we say the ESO system, is when maybe you might not actually be there, but then that thing, the consequences affect you. Okay, you were not at the workplace, but then what happens at the workplace, you are benefiting from it or it's affecting you. They were at the workplace and they were fighting. Now you were not there at the workplace. Yet still, when the person is channel her anger at the workplace towards you. That is the ESO system. Okay. Now, the fourth one is the macro system. We all know the macro system. When we are talking about what? When we are dealing with the entire community. So some intervention that benefit the entire community is the macro what? Macro system. The macro system. Okay. So it's a policies affecting children and families. So when there's a policy and that policy is affecting the entire community, that is the macro system. Okay. Now the last one is the chrono system. So when we say chrono, chrono has to do with what? Has to do with time. Chrono has to do with time. So the environmental events and transitions that occur throughout a person's life. So chrono has to do with time. Okay. So the changes that occurs in someone's life and changes occurs in time. So the type or the kind of changes that someone goes through is what? Is a chrono system. So the transitions, when you say transition, that's what that changes. And changes deals with time. So chrono means changes or transitions that someone goes through in their lifetime is a chrono system. Okay, chrono system. So that is the five main dimensions under the ecological system: the micro system, the meso system, the ESO system, okay, the macro system, and the chrono system. So the micro has to do with working directly with individuals and also smaller groups. The meso has to do with when two micro systems are interacting with each other. Okay, that's the meso. When we say ESO system, ESO is when someone is experiencing the consequences of something that they were not there. So something that you were not once part of it, but yes, so you are experiencing the consequences. For instance, let's say someone, maybe you were writing exams and someone went to cheat, and now they are saying that who was the one cheating? Now nobody was able to mention the person's name. Now they are saying that okay, if you are not able to mention the person's name, it means that everybody will have -5. You see, you are not the one doing, but then that thing is affecting you. That's the ESO system. Okay. Now with the macro system, we're talking about an intervention that benefits the entire community. That's the macro system. So community and also what? Society. That's the macro system. The chrono system has to do with what? The changes or the transitions that individual goes through in their lifetime. Okay, so chrono has to do with time, okay, place, and also what? So time, place, okay. So when we're talking about time and place, that's the chrono system. So the transitions or the changes that we go through in our lifetime is the chrono system. So these are the five main systems or dimensions under the ecological or the person environment theory. Please, I hope we are fine, right? Please, are you fine? All right. Now we are just about to end, so we are ending with some, I think 4 or 5 questions. All right. So please, let's have this question. All right. Okay. Okay. So write this question. Explain. So write this question. Explain biopsychosocial functioning in social work. Explain biopsychosocial functioning in social work, comma, you should bring comma there. Explain biopsychosocial functioning in social work using the three main components. Explain psychosocial functioning in social work using the three main components. Explain biopsychosocial functioning in social work using the three main components, that is biophysical, psychological, and social. Using the three main components, that is biophysical, psychological, and social. So this is the first question. See, this question is straight, right? It's straight and easy to go. So this question is trying to tell us that we should explain the biopsychosocial functioning in social work. Okay, so we can get this question and it can actually come like, let's say, 10 marks. You can get this question, it can come like 10 marks. And please don't forget, with the exam, you are answering everything on the answer booklet. So you give you space. So it means that you have to think before you write. So better write with pencil. And if you think you are okay, then use pen to deepen it. If you waste your space, unless you create some virtually and right there, okay, so you don't have to waste the space given to you. You have to think through the question very well before you write the answer. So now you've gotten the question. Now how can we answer this question? It's very simple. The question says that we should explain biopsychosocial functioning in social work using the three main components, that is the biophysical, psychological, and also what? The social dimension. Okay, now we know how we will explain this. So it's just very simple. So in your attempt to explain this one, thank you, International. So your attempt to explain this question, you have to first of all, create a scenario that the biopsychosocial is an approach. Okay, so the biopsychosocial approach is perceived as a perspective and not a theory. Okay, so if you are answering, start by saying that the biopsychosocial approach, okay, is a perspective and not a theory. The biopsychosocial approach is a perspective and not a theory. So that's the first line. Now, after that line, now you come and explain the dimensions. So when you take the biological or the biophysical, then you explain. Don't forget, I told you guys that biophysical is the same as biological. So you take biophysical, then you explain. You take psychological, then you explain. You take social, then you explain. Briefly, okay? When you are done, then you conclude by saying that the biopsychosocial helps social workers to consider diverse ways in assessing human behavior. Listen, I'm saying that after explaining the three dimensions, you conclude by saying that the biopsychosocial approach allows social workers to consider or to use, let me even make it simple. So it allows social workers to use diverse ways in assessing human behavior. Now you are done for that question. You are done. Please, are you fine? Please, are you fine? Please, are you fine? Please let me know if you are fine. Let me know. Okay. Please, if you just join the session, kindly make sure you like the session. Okay, kindly like the session for us. Please, are you fine with the definition I gave? So that is very, very simple. All right. Now, that's the first question. Please write this question too. Second question. Second question. So the second question says that what is meant by what is meant by what is meant by unidimensional social work assessment? What is meant by unidimensional approach in social work assessment? What is meant by unidimensional approach in social work assessment? What is meant by unidimensional approach in social work assessment? What is meant by unidimensional approach in social work assessment? I think we might all get the question by now, right? Okay. Now, when we say unidimensional approach in social work assessment, what are we trying to say? So when we say unidimensional approach, it's when social workers are using a single dimension in assessing clients' problem. So when we are using a single dimension to assess human problem, that is what unidimensional approach. Thank you, International. So when we say unidimensional approach in social work assessment is when social workers or when practitioners is using a single approach or a single dimension in assessing client problem. Okay, or when social workers is using a single dimension to understand client problem. Okay, that is what a unidimensional approach. A unidimensional approach is when social workers are using a single approach or a single dimension to assess client problem to what in order to find intervention or in order to address it. That is what a unidimensional approach. That's very, very, very simple. That's very simple for the unidimensional approach. Okay. Now let's move on to the next question. The next question. Okay, the next question. The next question says that explain two limitations to using the unidimensional approach. Explain two limitations to using the unidimensional approach for social work assessment. So that is the limitations of unidimensional approach for social work assessment. What are the limitations to using the unidimensional approach for social work assessment? Limitations. And I hope the last time when we met, we talked about the limitations. This is how we all remember. We talk about the limitations of the unidimensional approach. Can we remember? Or do we all recall that we talked about the limitations of the unidimensional approach? Please, do we recall? And I had to it, right? We've used it to roast corn, right? Okay. So let's write the answers. Okay. So one limitation of the unidimensional approach is that it ignores, okay, it ignores the environment. Okay. So the unidimensional approach always ignores the environment. It doesn't take consideration of the environment because the focus is only on the individual. So because the focus is only on the individual, it ignores the environment. And if it ignores the environment, it wouldn't be able to solve the client's problem for them. So the unidimensional approach, one limitation is that it always ignores the environment and focuses on the individual. That is one. Two, two. Please, are we okay with the one? Are you okay with the one? Okay, so two, it uses a limited, so it uses a limited approach in what? Solving client problem. So it uses limited approach in solving client problem. So meaning that one limitation of the unidimensional approach is that it is not holistic in nature. So the unidimensional approach is not holistic in nature. It's not holistic in nature. It's not holistic in nature. The unidimensional approach is not holistic in nature. Okay. So that is two. Let me add one to make it three. So the unidimensional approach, another limitation is that it is limited in its intervention. It is limited in its intervention. The unidimensional approach is limited in its intervention. The unidimensional approach is limited in its intervention. That is the third one. It is limited in its intervention. That's the third one. Let me add another one to make it four. The fourth limitation is that it is not comprehensive in its assessment. Okay. Or let me say, it is not comprehensive in its evaluation. Let's make it evaluation. Okay. It is not comprehensive in its evaluation. It is not comprehensive in its evaluation. It is not comprehensive in its evaluation. So these are what? These are the limitations of the unidimensional approach. Now let's go to the next question. So the next question, okay. So the next question says that, so the next question, you just listen to the next question, don't write it. But I think um so the next question is actually trying to letting us know that in social work we have different terms in social work. Are you okay? And these terms include a theory, a perspective, a model, approach, and a method. So the last question is trying to say that these terms, that is a theory, a perspective, a model, and an approach and a method, they are five. They are often used interchangeably. So the next question is that we should briefly explain each of them. So the next question is like, we are explaining each of these things. That is a theory, a perspective, a model, an approach, and also a method. So there are five. So we are briefly explaining these what terms in social work practice. So that is the last question that we will talk about. Okay. So I'm very sure at least we've done something. Okay. But then there's this table I want you guys to know. I don't know, maybe she can give you this table and she can leave some spaces that fill in the blanks. Yes, she can. I know my boss, she can do that. But this table, I think I drew it, so I would have to project it for you to know, for you to see it. Okay. Yeah, I'm very sure maybe she can give you a table of three columns. The first column is the first column is yes, please, international concept is fast. So a theory, a perspective, a model, an approach, a method, and also a concept. Are you okay? So they are all parts. They are all parts. Okay. All right. I really want you guys to do. Okay. So what you want? Please put that one in. Okay, I will do that. I will do that. Okay, I will do that. All right. Now there's this, as I said, I have the feeling that maybe she can give you a table with three columns. Now on the columns, maybe one column will be on a theory, the second column will be on a perspective, and the last column will be on, let's say, practice method. Now she can give you, let's say, a theory, then she will omit the perspective and the method, then you have to fill in that blanks. I have a feeling that she can give you that thing. Okay. Now I have it. I think I drew it, and I want to show you here. Okay. So I think maybe I have to go back small for you guys to know it. Okay. So see something. See something here. Okay. So see social work theories. So I have a belief that she can give you this table, a table like this. Let me come back small so you see it. Yes, I believe that she can give you a table like this, maybe like three columns. So this is a theory. We have a theory here, we have perspective, then we have practice method. So let's say she can give you, let's say, psychodynamic theory. Then she will leave the perspective for you guys, and you have to fill in that perspective. So if the theory is psychodynamic theory, what is its perspective? Now, the perspective of psychodynamic theory is what? Is psychodynamic perspective. Then maybe she can also leave you, let's say, the method. See, the method is what? Is, let's say, crisis intervention, something like that. I don't know, but I have a belief that maybe she can give you something like this. Okay. Now let's look at the second one. The second one is what? Is social learning theory. Okay. So that's the theory. So the theory is what? Social learning theory. Now the perspective is what? Is social learning. And the practice method is what? Is group work, or let's say cognitive what? Base or behavioral therapy. So she can omit, let's say, the theory, give you the perspective and the method, then you have to fill in that theory. I don't know, but and I think it's in your slides. Okay. So it just came to me that I should tell you guys to just look at this one too, because I know she can bring this one. She likes tables. She likes giving tables. So she can actually give a table of three columns like this. So we have a theory, a perspective, a practice method, or a method. Now, you see, all these are theories. So let's say, you see, we have system theories. Okay. So the system theory, now the perspective of the system theory is what? Is the system perspective. Okay. Now, what is the method for the system theory? Assessment, or community practice, or community development. So this is the assessment, or this is the method for what? For the system theory. Okay. Now, the first one, or the first theory, was developmental theory. So this developmental theory, what is its perspective? The perspective is what? It's developmental perspective. What is its practice method? Assessment. Okay. Like, I don't know, but I have a feeling that she can give you a table like this, and you fill in the blanks. Okay. So look at this table very well. I think now you can see the table very well. Okay. I don't know. Even if this doesn't come, something like, I have a feeling something like this can come. But you just study it. After all, if it doesn't come, that is fine. If it doesn't come, that is fine. But just see it well. Okay. So we see we have humanistic theory. What is its perspective? Human strength. Okay. Human strength is the perspective of what? Humanistic theory. What is its practice method? Counseling or advocacy. Okay. Now let's look at the second theory. The second theory is what? Psychodynamic theory. What is its perspective? Psychodynamic perspective. What is its practice method? Crisis intervention, or psychodynamic what? therapy. Okay, now something like this, I don't know, but it's better you know than you don't know at all. So you just know them. Okay, just know them. I think that will be all for today. So thank you very much for your time on this session. I wish you all the best. I know you do well. Okay, I know you do well. As I said, I know you really do well. So just what we've just discussed, the questions in anything, and please, I think the last, I've forgotten the last online session that we had on human behavior concerning your semester, that I said something came, so my boss changed the questions. I think that discussion I had with you, I talk about several things there. So please go and listen to that discussion to is on the channel. I think, yeah, I forgot. I remember. So my boss will actually add everything in the end of sem. So that video too. Make sure you accept that video too as well. Okay. Please, the practice column. Can I use assessments throughout since the theories are all used? Okay, maybe, but the practice method you want to use assessment throughout. Okay, it's not bad, but is it every theory has its own practice method. Even though assessment is very key, I get your point. So you just write assessment. Okay, write assessment. They will see what they will do. Okay, we will see how they do. So you if anything like this come, you just write assessment for the practice method. Okay, but then you just look through the table very well. I think some are even counseling, case work, you see, advocacy. Do you get it? So I think even empowerment is even part. So it's fine. It's fine. Okay. All right. So please, thank you guys very much. This session was very long, 2 hours, but it's fine. Yeah. So um, I wish you all the best, okay? I wish you all the best. I know you do well. For human behavior, as I always tell you guys, it's not difficult at all, at all, at all. It's not difficult at all. Okay. What we've touched on, please make sure you come back and listen to the videos again, because what we've touched on, they are very, very important. Okay. All right. So I wish you all the best. Make sure you like the session. If you haven't liked the session, please make sure you like before you exit. And if you haven't subscribed to, make sure you subscribe to the session or the channel before you exit as well. Okay. So I will see you guys when I see you guys. Okay. All right. Bye bye.